welcome to Make It Make Sense, a look back at 2025 with the Fuller Project and friends. As I said already, to those who may just be joining us now, my name is Eliza Anyangwe and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Fuller Project. The Fuller Project is a 10-year-old nonprofit newsroom that focuses on issues that disproportionately affect women and gender diverse people. Our North Star is impact. We report on issues where we are adamant, committed, and clear-eyed in our commitment to catalyze positive change for women in all their diversities. This is a new experience for us because we have been really sort of focused over the last 10 years in reporting journalism and getting that journalism out. And now, given the times that we are living in, given this moment where, gender equality is under threat, all matter of sort of like expansion of freedoms, and also independent journalism is under threat, it felt like just the right moment to, instead of retreat, to really actually come out of the shadows and establish Fuller as the global newsroom that it is, focusing on issues that other people do not focus on and trying to write women and gender minorities into the main conversations that we are all having. And so it is in that context that I have two really fantastic people who I admire deeply and was desperate for any excuse to be on a stage with them. So we built that stage. Allow me to introduce you to our speakers, who are both in black. I love. There was no coordination, but it's giving chic. Angela Saini is an author and science journalist. Probably some of you will have her book. We in our household love The Patriarchs, How Men Came to Rule, which is her last book out, but she is just critically acclaimed and is working on other things that she will be talking to us about here. She is a science, an academic at MIT teaching science writing. Joining her, and I don't know where you are at the moment, Rokhaya, that looks like a hotel room. Where are you calling us from?
Yes, I'm in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia.
Love it. Our newsletter producer Maya is in Addis as well.
Really?
So yeah, we have a member of our team in Ethiopia also.
That's amazing.
So Amasagnelu, which is thank you for joining us all the way from Addis. Rokhaya Diallo is an award-winning French journalist, writer, educator, filmmaker, and also just my sort of like hair crush. Every time I'm like, how do I get what Rokhaya's got going on? There are so many other things I could say about both these people, but Wikipedia has you covered if you're looking for them. This is an event where we are happy to take questions also from the extensions of the Fuller community, our newsletter subscribers. If you're not subscribed to the letter, please do. But for now, let's get situated. You didn't just come to hear me speak. I want to ask our, let me just tell you this. Our event is going to be divided up into 4 different sections. As the title suggests, we'll be looking back on the year through the lens of some of the reporting that we did, covering some of the big events of 2025, but also looking forward. We want this to be a space where I want to be inspired, informed, to think critically, to think differently, to think even humorously about some of the events of this year, to kind of slow down and take a different perspective than the ones that we're often given. And I have just the most fantastic 2 people to do that. So to start us off, let's situate a little bit. We know where you are, Rokhaya, in Addis, but how has 2025 been for you?
It's been challenging. And it's been also, even if there have been many challenges that I faced and that I've seen many women across the world facing, I still have hope. So I would say that it's still hopeful because I see that I can see resistance. Wherever there is oppression, there is resistance. So that gives me some little hope. But the year has been, I've been to many different places and I've seen people being desperate, being very pessimistic, fearing authoritarian regimes being elected in the US, of course, but also in Europe, in several different parts, in Japan, in India, in so many places. So I think it's been, to me, like trying to put my mind in in fighting mode, because I think that we need to have some energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Get the gloves on. Angela, have you felt similarly? What has 2025 held? What did it hold for you?
I mean, yeah, it's a very, very tough year. For me in particular, I got into journalism in the first place because I lived in a part of the UK where the far right was very active. I desperately hoped that my son would never have to see the kind of things that I saw growing up, and now it feels that it's very, very likely. So what terrifies me about the coming couple of years is that these far-right nationalist, ethnic nationalist parties will start to gain a bigger toehold, especially in Europe. In the US, they're already quite powerful, but there is a strong pushback. I mean, I agree with Rokhaya that, there's always resistance where there is oppression. And so I see that plurality out there. I just wish that sometimes the political left, the left that is in power would get its act together a bit more. I just want to kind of, grab it by the collar and just shake it a bit and say, come on, we have to do better than this.
No, I think absolutely. And I can see thumbs up emojis on the screens because people are already agreeing with you vociferously. So, the first segment of our conversation together is a desire to sort of to have a fuller review of 2025. We've already sort of touched on some of the main themes that people are thinking about, right? That we are all living through the rise of the far right, the strain that democracy is under, whether or not democracy actually has fully achieved its aims or not. Of course, the Fuller Project is looking at the main issues of our day, but looking at them through a women-focused and gender minority-focused lens. So when we were covering stories this year, I think starting at the start of the year, the sort of big one that really got all our attention was the US aid freeze. And we were thinking about how did we want to cover this because, of course, every media outlet around the world was talking about first the stop work order and then the aid freeze. And what we at the Fuller Project decided to do was to take a deep dive into the data to show that even in countries that didn't rely heavily on US foreign assistance, US foreign assistance was still the biggest source of funding to programs that disproportionately benefited women and girls. So whether that's family planning or sexual and reproductive health and services. So all over the world, whether your country was a relatively low beneficiary of US aid, for example, India, or you were in a country that was a relatively high beneficiary of US aid, Malawi or Kenya, women and girls were disproportionately affected. So that was like one story for us that felt, and one moment really that continues to roll on that felt really pivotal. What happened? Where were you? Do you remember where you were when that news broke of the US aid freeze? How have you thought about it since that time? Angela, what do you think about, the move away from foreign assistance and the fallout?
I mean, it's been really devastating. And I have friends who work in the aid industry, and they've told me that once the US did it, other countries decided that they would also be pulling back as well. So there's just this kind of dampening across the board. Add to that the fact that philanthropic organizations have seen their funds contract. They're also pulling back. So just across the board, it's a huge problem. Putting it in context, there have been concerns about the way that aid has been administered for very many years. And I do feel that if some of those concerns had been addressed earlier and, more action had been done on that front, making sure it was more fair, efficient, that there wasn't abuses happening, then maybe the public would feel more energized to push back against it. I've been surprised at how much, especially in the US and in Europe, people have just been quiet. These things have happened. They're having such a huge impact on the ground, and people don't feel motivated to get angry about it or push their governments. And I wonder if that's because the problems that were there weren't addressed soon enough. So, a lot of blame and a lot of responsibility has to be spread around. But I really hope that, we kind of grab this issue more carefully. It was interesting. I went to a Fuller event. Nicholas Christoph, I think, was speaking there. You were chairing it. And he was saying that it's very hard to get people interested in the fact that these programs are shutting down. It's having such an impact on women and girls on the ground. And the one way that he was able to do it was by highlighting the wastage. You know, you build a hospital or you build a clinic, you have these programs, so much money goes into it, taxpayers' money, and then nothing happens. And that is, you know, truly heartbreaking that the facilities are there and they're not being used.
Yeah, absolutely. Rokhaya, please feel free to jump right in.
Yes, I really share the same views. I'm struck by the fact that the pushback wasn't as strong as it should have been. I'm not sure that everyone realized how serious the situation is. It's been it's been a systemic dismantling of something that was built for decades. Even if there was, I'm happy that you addressed that there was something structurally that was not well operated, and I think that we're facing the consequences of not thinking carefully and through and deeply about how aid was distributed before, and now we face those consequences. And I wasn't aware, for example, about the stocks that were in Europe, in Belgium.
Yes.
So I was shocked that to learn that the contraceptives were in a ceiling in a place in Belgium, just across the border of my country, and that they were there, they would not be used. And it was, I know that the French Planned Parenthood has tried to access those products, but it hasn't been possible. So just thinking of being so close to those products that will not be of no use to anyone, and at the same time thinking about how those decisions will affect so many women, so many girls, in particularly in the most fragile places, and just in the name of a public declaration, because those products have been paid. So it's already been paid by taxpayer money. So not distributing them doesn't change anything for the taxpayers that already supported them for being shared. So it's just communication, political communication that affects actual lives in a very concrete way. And to me, that's a word from the U.S. president costs many lives, many daily lives, much of the comfort of women and girls that haven't even heard his speeches. So that's quite shocking.
Yeah, for context for anyone who is not aware of that story, right? So every Republican government going back several decades has brought into effect something that is known as the global gag rule. So, withdrawing funding for organizations that do family planning or reproductive health work in different parts of the world. That combined, Trump enforced it in his last term, and again this time, and expanded that. That combined with, of course, the stop work order and then the dismantling of USAID meant that contraceptives that were paid for by the U.S. taxpayer to the tune of millions of dollars was heading out to the places where they needed to go, and then was stopped in Belgium because of the political situation. The U.S. doesn't want them back, or I'm not quite sure what is happening with them there. Countries have tried to buy them, NGOs and civil society organizations or family planning organizations have tried to buy them, and the U.S. will not sell them. And so there is just this stock of IUDs and other contraceptives. And we see, coupled with that, the misinformation around that. In September, we heard the Trump administration calling contraceptives abortifacients, which basically means suggesting that contraception can cause abortions, right? So sullying, the kind of information landscape about these things, and really just having such important consequences. So that was a kind of WTF moment this year amongst many that we are trying to make sense of.
And it's millions of dollars worth
Absolutely.
contraceptives in Belgium, in a Belgian warehouse. So
In a Belgian warehouse.
they're of no use for anyone. It's just lost opportunities for women and loss of money.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Another story that, and it actually, thinking about let's just go to the next one. Another story that we were watching, or let's call it more a trend, is the trend towards increased conflicts, and not only the active conflicts that we see, the genocides in Sudan or in Gaza, but also the sort of growing militarization. The flip side of the conversation we were having about foreign assistance and overseas development aid is that even other countries that are not doing it with the same aplomb and sort of like cheek of the US government have also, like the UK, shrunk their commitment to foreign aid and are putting that money into military spending. And I'm just curious what you both thought about what kind of impact might we imagine in societies as we are entering into a new phase of sort of like militarism, right? Like, as military might and military armament, and and it's starting to seem as essential, necessary, with Russia bearing down on Europe, but also Trump doing in Latin America what he's doing. I'm wondering, from your perspectives, as you think about the impact of these things, what do you think about the rising conflict and the rising militarism?
Well, Rokhaya, you go ahead.
No, go ahead if you want. I'm
Well,
fine.
I come from a military family, and I do, and I studied security for a long time, military security and weapons. And, as the world gets more dangerous, what are countries supposed to do? States have to defend themselves.
Right.
Ukraine without a military, what is it supposed to do in the face of
Sure.
Russia? So it's this kind of escalation that terrifies me, because then everybody, has their guard up. They're investing more in their defense technologies and everything else. And I don't see any way out of it, because as long as those threats exist, as long as that, that worry is there, then that's what governments are going to do. What I think about in taking the long view when it comes to women's rights is that wherever there is conflict, there's always an opportunity then for traditionalist forces to then reassert their power, which almost always has a negative impact on the rights of women and girls. And you can see this in modern day Afghanistan, that even though the US has pulled out there, that we still see the Taliban kind of occupy that space and then promise security. And once they've promised security, then you have the clampdown on women's rights. And that you see that repeated all over the place, wherever there are coups and revolutions and wherever there is military, that there is this promise by traditionalists that we will fix things, we will make things better. But that almost somehow comes hand in hand with, okay, now women, you should be looking after your families. You should be having as many children as possible. You should be, this is your place. It is our place as men then to be fighting and defending you. So and you see that play out in every single conflict zone.
I thought that was really important, actually, that connection. And I think that's what I was curious about when I was thinking about rising militarism, is that the sense of what does it cost to offer security, because it seems to be coming with a certain traditionalist view of the role of men and the role of women, and the requirement then to live in a binary world, and how these things all sort of fold one into the other. And I think it's really interesting that you make that connection, Angela, because I hadn't quite thought of that. I was really curious, what does it mean how should we be thinking about the need for the for sovereignty and security at the same time as thinking about what is lost or what we need to be vigilant of, or what is at risk. Rokhaya, what would you want to add?
Yes, just I think it was last week, a very high-profile general of the French army said that families should be ready to lose their sons. And a couple of days after President Macron announced that he wanted to reinstate the military service. And I can't prevent myself from connecting it to what he said last year. He made a statement saying that France needed to. He basically called for a demographic rearmament because the fertility rate was down, and he said that we needed to rearm our country in a demographic way. So to me, that's a very obvious way of thinking about women's body as a platform, just a tool to make people to die in war. And that's very interesting to listen what he said a year and I think it was almost 3 years ago about rearming, the demographic rearmament, because now it resonates very differently because the idea is maybe to send those children to war. And I'm always and I agree with you with the idea that it resettle the traditional roles, because you have the men who will go to fight in the battlefields, and women who will be actually bodies used by the nation to support, to create human beings for them to fight for in the name of the nation of the country. So it's I'm kind of watching what's next, but it doesn't really look good.
It seems nobody wins in that, right? You are, as often in patriarchy, the body of the man is the body that is sent off to war and can die for his country, and the body of the woman is the body that produces the babies. I think that actually is an interesting segue to something that I know, Angela, you are watching. So to the folks who are listening in on the conversation, I asked our speakers what were the events and stories of this year, the sort of trends of this year that they wanted us to talk about as well. Angela was spot on in also identifying how, pronatalism and this idea of encouraging, people to have babies has been a real theme of 2025 also. And not only in the US, where, folks like Elon Musk had suggestions for how the Trump administration might do that, but also in other places where there seems to be a logical, necessary, useful, conversation needed about demographic shifts and demographic trends as populations age. Angela, tell us what struck you about this trend this year.
I mean, this kind of goes to the heart of the argument that I was trying to make when, just as Rokhaya says, patriarchal power, the patriarchal state rests on this dichotomy between the young woman who is seen as increasing population, providing more bodies in order to populate the state, produce a surplus and provide soldiers. The young man is seen as the fighter, the defender, willing to give up his life for anything. Those are the roots of the gendered society. That's where it comes from. In Neolithic times, people just did everything. It's only with the rise of the patriarchal state that you have this kind of division of labor. And you see it play out absolutely everywhere. So in France, we see, but also in Russia, even earlier, a few years ago, because Russia has been losing so many young men, obviously because of its conflict, they put out an advertising campaign, and the slogan to recruit more soldiers into the war was "Be a man." This is how you prove your masculinity to the world. And at the same time, there was a military honor, a state honor that was given to women who had more than 10 children, the Mother Heroine Medal, 10 children. So, it is so obvious. It's completely naked what these patriarchal states are trying to do. And you see that play out in every single different place. And sometimes with regional variations, for example, in Hungary and the US, the pronatalist movement doesn't want everyone having more kids. They don't want more immigrants. Right. They want certain types of people to have more kids, other people to just leave, just get rid of them. And that's the pattern that we see, is that on the one hand, you see this assault on women and girls who are seen as kind of unwanted asylum seekers or refugees or migrants, that we don't want any more of you, that you are kind of destroying our nation. On the other hand, white women and girls, you keep having more children. You have as many as possible, you stay there. And that is what the pro-natalist movement has turned into, a kind of twin attack on women on both sides. One, why are you not having more children? And two, why are the wrong types of women having too many children? And it's terrifying. It's really, what does it take us back to? What worries me even more is that, and we saw this with the rise of Charlie Kirk, and I think with Charlie Kirk's murder, which of course we don't condone, political murder is wrong, obviously. What Kirk represented, though, was a very traditionalist view of men and women. His wife was quite happy to give up work and stay home having children when she married him, because that was her worldview. And there are very many women who feel this way. And that is something we have to confront as feminists. We need to think about that this isn't, a battle of men versus women. This is a battle of ideology against other ideologies. We have to be able to make the case for why equality matters, why gender shouldn't restrict the kind of life that you live. If you want to stay at home and have children, great. But that should not be a requirement on all women. It shouldn't be imposed on all women. And I think that's what worries me, is that is the direction that we're moving in.
No, you're absolutely. I mean, trad
Yes,
wives are nothing new, right, Rokhaya? What is it? Yeah, tell us, please.
yeah,
Jump in.
to me,
Cut me off.
it really echoes the statements of Giorgia Meloni, the Italy's post-fascist prime minister. I think it was a couple of years ago, she made the fact of boosting the Italian birth rate a patriotic duty to offset the so-called ethnic replacement. So it's exactly the idea that we need to have more European white babies to make sure to offset the fact that there is supposedly a great replacement coming from Africa to replace the initial indigenous white European population. And France is not only in Europe, where we have several French departments all over the world. And I'm thinking also about the fact that we have a specific island in the Indian Ocean. Actually, France has two islands there, but I'm thinking about Mayotte. So it's one of the few French regions that have experienced a birth rate surge. And young women in Mayotte were offered to, they were proposed being offered sterilization by the government, which is very interesting because most, there are like maybe 99% Muslims, most of them Black. And it's interesting to see that even if a French region is doing good in having a high birth rate, it's not okay because they're not, the part of France that is supposed to have babies. So it was hidden by medical claims, but that doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. Why would you prevent young French women from having kids? Since we need those kids, we are supposed to need those kids. And the president made a discourse to urge women to have children. So that's also interesting. The idea that is also a racial motto, and is very, very colored with the idea that we need to purify the idea of Europeanness and Frenchness.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, across the minority world, across the West, we're grappling with racialized lives and histories, and it's so much harder in a country like France, where that is not acknowledged as part of how French people identify themselves. But yet the example of Mayotte, which for those who don't know is a small island near Comoros, near Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, which is French territory, so the people who live there are French citizens. And so, to your point, the idea that the French president is asking, for women to do their patriotic duty by having babies, but oh no, we don't want those
Not
babies.
those babies.
Not those babies. Right? But and how
That's
do you
you.
explain it? Not thanks, but no thanks. Thanks for volunteering, Mayotte. And yeah, it's I'm glad we're laughing because there's so much of this year that has been enraging. And I think what is one of the things that I have found difficult that I wanted to talk to you both about was in the ways we have these conversations, right? Because you mentioned Giorgia Meloni. There are people like Giorgia Meloni. In fact, there are many more women in the European far right. The head of the far right party in Austria, not only is she identifies as a woman. She is a queer woman. She has a wife who is, I think, of South Asian descent. All the ways in which we were, I think people traditionally were able to identify who is progressive or who is not, or who is supportive of rights and and freedoms and who is not, is called into question by these people who are fighting the repressive fight and yet are doing so in brown bodies and female bodies, etc. And I think about that, and as a journalist, and how do we explain to people, actually, no, when it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. When we are thinking about how identities affect how people relate to the ideologies, as you were talking about, Angela, right? Like, how do you think about this? Because of course, patriarchy requires women to advance it, and as does white supremacy. I'm finding it really difficult trying to explain to people, this might be a woman, but it doesn't make her a feminist, right? How do you make those explanations? Rokhaya, you're nodding, so let's start with you. She can't find the unmute button.
Well, yeah. I didn't get. Was it for me? Yes.
Oh, yes, it was. And my apologies because
okay. I didn't get the end of your sentence. That's why I wasn't sure.
Don't worry.
Yeah,
I was just rambling on.
Of course, in France, the head of the far right in France is Marine Le Pen, and she's a woman. She embodies the idea of the far right being, that blonde woman using her femininity to look progressive, and at the same time, like when you look what the far right has voted nationally and in the European Parliament, they have never supported any advancement related to women's rights, to LGBTQIA rights. They have never. But at the same time, whenever there is a controversy, or like, for example, a public case of some. I remember that a couple of years ago, I think it was last year, a young student was. Unfortunately, a female student was raped and killed in a park in Paris, and the author was an undocumented immigrant. And all the far rights were all over the place about that case, saying that it was about immigration. And I remember being on a TV set with one of the MPs from the far right and asking him, then why you have never supported, I've never heard you speaking about any other kind of assault targeting women. You were silent, for example, when the trial of Dominique Pellicot, the man who
Gisèle Pellicot's husband,
like Dominique Pellicot is the husband. So he's how can I say that? He actually, how do you say in English, soumission chimique, like he drugged her, he drugged his wife. Yeah, he drugged his wife and had her being massively raped by 91 men, and raped her himself. And he was white, and the men were white or not white, but we haven't heard the far right for that. But when it's one single individual raping a woman and killing her, and that individual happens to be undocumented, suddenly it's a case, and it's something that should be addressed nationally. So it's interesting to see how female voices are used to stigmatize a certain patriarchy that is mostly related to Muslim men, but they don't see anything when it's someone white or someone mainstream.
Yeah, Angela?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to this kind of deep-rooted idea that there are essential qualities that some people have that some people don't have, that you just can't trust them, even if they've never done anything wrong, you just can't trust them as a group. And that essentialism is so deeply rooted in the far right, and not just when it comes to race, also when it comes to gender, that women need to be protected from men, that men by their nature are going to be violent, some men more than others, but women just can't trust men, and that we will protect you, we will look after you then. And we need to understand the psyche behind that, I think, because as feminists, kind of 90s feminism, 2000s feminism was very much about whatever a woman does is her own choice, and we have to support it, whatever women do. What do we do now in the 2020s when we see so many women on the far right? We shouldn't be condemning them as women. What we should be doing is engaging with these ideologies and let go of this idea that just because of your gender or just because of your race, you can only ever hold one idea in your head, that you can only ever believe one thing. It's obviously not true. Everyone can believe anything depending on what their values are, what they care about, what their religion is, what their motivation is in life and their personal experiences. So, when I was growing up, my dad would often say to me, because I'm a born journalist, I care about gossip, I care about people, but he would always say to me, Angela, don't focus on the people, focus on the ideas, focus on the ideas. And I think that's what we need to come back to, is what are the ideas here that are appealing to women, that are drawing them into these networks, that make them feel that there is some kind of form of liberation here that they're not getting in everyday feminism, in the feminism that we recognize. And maybe we need to do a better job of selling that feminism then to women, and not just to women and girls, but to boys too, that this is liberation for you all, that you don't have to live up to these stereotypes. You don't have to be bound by these stereotypes. We can do something better. I think what worries me a little bit about the progressive left sometimes is that we just rest on the assumption that we're right, that we're just naturally right, and that people who don't see that must be, crazy or stupid, that they just don't know what's going on. But every version of the world that we want to see happen, we have to make real for people. We have to show them what the benefits of that world really are.
Yeah, no, there were some thoughts that were sparked for me when I was listening to you talk, Angela. First, randomly, about love, but I don't think maybe we should take that segue just yet. When you were asking sort of like, what do these women care about? And I heard someone speaking, and it wasn't in Bell Hooks' book All About Love, but more recently saying, the best way to understand what motivates people is what they care about and what they love or what they're afraid, and what they're trying to protect. And I'm curious what you think about that. But first, when you mentioned boys, of course, another big phenomenon from this year is the TV show on Netflix, Adolescence, which everybody has spoken about, and everybody around, at least many parts of the world, were watching and talking about. Again, curious what you think about the sense of the neglect of boys and the growing divide between boys and girls. Is it much ado about nothing? Is there something really meaningful there that we should be paying attention to? Yeah, how have you understood the interest in men and boys? Is it useful or not? Maybe the binary isn't helpful. I guess it's yes and. But Angela, what do you think about? Did you watch the show to begin with?
I didn't watch a show, and that's partly because I have a 12-year-old son, and I'm really terrified about what's coming. Once he becomes a teenager, what have I got in store for me? So I kind of shy away from this, this kind of output, which you're right, there is a lot of it now, that there is a lot of commentators and a lot of kind of media giving us that that experience, showing us the kind of challenges that boys face, which frankly, under patriarchal societies is immense. The pressure on boys to live up to these masculinist standards, to, be a certain way in order to be a man, is incredibly damaging. And again, I feel that is a slightly overlooked part of the feminist movement, is that we focus on girls so much. We don't think about, well, actually, the boys need work too. They also need to be encouraged to come out of themselves and be good fathers and be, good allies, to be good partners to their partners, to be the kind of men that we also need them to be the kind of people that we need them to be. And I've certainly tried with my son. Number one, I keep him off social media. I think that's a terrible vector for these things. I don't
Mark
trust these
Zuckerberg.
companies at all. And that's partly because I'm writing, the chapter I'm writing at the moment is looking at social media. I don't trust these companies at all with our children. But also, I've tried to give him an upbringing that kind of reminds him that he is just a person, number one, and he can be a person in lots and lots of different ways. He shouldn't be, that he can look at any person and feel that they are a role model. He doesn't just have to look at my husband or the men in his life, that I am also a role model for him, that I also want him to be like me. And I don't know if children are getting that message. And part of the reason I think for that is that we've entered this age where we have become much more polarized. We are in these kind of echo chambers, not just based on political interests, but also on gender. And that is very deliberate on the part of the big social media companies, on, the part of corporations as a whole, segmenting us for 100 years until we end up in this place where we can't imagine a life any different from this very narrow stereotype that they've given us.
Yeah, so much to say on that. Rokhaya,
Yeah, I've watched the series, and I agree we need to have rooms for boys and men to think about who they are in patriarchy, and how they benefit from it, and how it can encourage them to be violent. And I'm glad that it was actually made by a man, because we as a female feminists, we like spend much time trying to educate, trying to defend ourselves, trying to write, to convince. And I think that men had to have to do their part. And at the same time, there is something in the series that I wasn't totally comfortable with, the fact that the girl that was targeted by the teenager was mean to him. And to me, it didn't sound right, because I don't think that those acts of violence are grounded into something real. Most of the time, it's just, it doesn't have to be motivated by, the attitude of someone. And I think that it really diminished the strength of the series, because it it had a reason for being mean, for targeting her specifically. But most of the cases of violence have no reason. They're just an act of domination. It's just a man telling a woman that he's a man, or a boy telling that he's a boy, and trying to impersonate masculinity. So that's the little aspect of the series, to me, that wasn't necessary. Like, they didn't need to have we didn't need to have a mean girl to be the victim of that such an act of violence.
I don't remember if there were any sort of like flashback scenes. I don't remember whether they showed her being mean. And if they didn't, I'm curious. Well, my sense is that as we have, as you know, as a lot of the data and writing on incels shows, is that it is just the perception that a woman might be unkind to you, or might reject you, or might, slight you in some way, that triggers an anger that is, that then leads to violence, right? So I can't remember if it was actually depicted, but that sense of, you know, entitlement, but also the insecurity. There was a really good article in the London Review of Books many years ago called "A Right to Sex." So does anyone have a right to sex? And which is, I found, really fascinating to read, as it explored incel culture, essentially, and this idea of, of this anger that needs very little evidence, right, to lead to violence, was definitely something that adolescents explored. You've both talked about social media, and I think in this sort of segment of our of our conversation together, I think that's the last place that I wanted us to go. A reporter for the Fuller Project had an interview earlier in the year with British writer Laura Bates, who has a new book out this year, in which she was talking about sort of tech-driven misogyny. We also know that much, not so many weeks ago, or maybe it was a few months ago now, it's all bleeding into one. Sam Altman of OpenAI was talking about, I think I read a headline that called it like the pornification of ChatGPT. There are probably lots of other examples of tech-driven misogyny. Has that also been something that you've been struck by this year? Does it factor in the trends? Was it overreported, underreported? Where would you place it, Angela?
I can start. I left social media a while back because of the kind of abuse that I was getting when my previous books came out. So I don't know what kind of cesspool X has become since in the last 6, 7 years since I left. I've heard it's terrible. I'm not on Facebook. I use Instagram, but just very little for work. I don't really browse through feeds. But I do know, like I said, I've just been writing this chapter on artificial intelligence and the way that the automation of segmenting people is coming about. So, as much as you might, this is going to be in my next book, so I can't go into it in much detail, but when you sign up to Facebook or you sign up to almost every social media platform, they will ask you your gender. Now, that is not just for their own personal interest. That is then used by advertisers to decide who are we going to target content to. So advertisers can choose, do I want to target this at men or women or everyone? And that has been going on for way more than a decade at this point. All the platforms do it. If they're not asking your gender, they're guessing your gender. They're using your feed to figure out, or your search patterns to figure out, are they male or female? And then they're doing exactly the same thing with advertisers. What effect does this have over time? It creates these weird silos where people are just seeing certain types of content, getting funneled into it. And loads of people have written on this kind of polarization on steroids, that you just get these very weird worlds online, which are completely unrepresentative of the real world, which have been no reflection to how reasonable an actual human being can be in person. And we get angrier and angrier about it. And then it creates this kind of vicious cycle between people. The only way I can think of, and AI, I should add, automates that. So it does it to an even greater degree. The only way out of that is to plug out. And, they will tell you it's inevitable, that you have to use these technologies, that there is no escaping them. They are there. And if you don't use them, you are just living in the past. That is not true. The only real agency that any of us have in this system of hatred, which is essentially what it is, mechanized hatred that is just lining the pockets of people like Mark Zuckerberg, is to say, I'm just not going to use it anymore. That's the thing that they're most terrified of. As long as we're arguing about, how vicious is this platform, how hateful is this platform, they're still making money. The only time they're not making money is when we leave.
Oh, so many thoughts, Rokhaya.
Oh yeah, I totally share your views, Angela. Thank you. To me, it's about the infrastructure that enables scaled misogyny, and the fact that it can now be automated really widen the scale of how it can affect women. And I think that we need also to not to forget that it can also be used not only by individuals but also by government. We've seen journalists being targeted by gender disinformation that was authored by government or political group because they were documenting some corruption issues from about elections. So it's also a tool that is used to build very easily rumors and fake news about women to actually make them less credible. and the fact that it's so easy now to make those news, those information look real. The fact that now we can create deep fakes in a way that is so credible is very, very, very dangerous, because especially women, when they are targeted by gender disinformation, it's mostly sexualize them. It sexualizes them. It attacks them as women, as potential sexual objects, and it objectifies them. It never focuses on what they do as as professionals, but who they are as women. And it's been facilitated by technology, and I think that we should like it's to me, it hasn't been reported enough on in a gender lens, how it's has disproportionately affected women, and how it has also discouraged them to speak up, and how it has affected actually their freedom of speech. Right. To me, isn't visible enough in how it's documented.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that there is so much interest in democracy and so much interest in misinformation, but that often is about, Russian farm bots or and that kind of influence in democracy. And often I remember someone I was speaking to calling sort of like, women and other minoritized groups as the sort of canaries in the coal mine, like the disinformation that is targeting them, that no one is paying attention to. And that silences them, right? Women public figures, women in sports, women journalists, women politicians, the sexualized shaming, and doxing, and fake imagery of them that is shared, specifically intended to silence their voices, right? And the kind of democratic impact of that, right? How can we have a democracy, which, if the concept is whatever, by the people for the people, if only half the people are participating, and if the other half cannot participate because they're they're subjected to violence for doing so, and this perception that online violence isn't real violence, whereas in so many ways it so clearly is. So just the fact, Angela,
it actually expressed there is like a concrete link between online violence and offline violence. You have had many people who have been doxxed or their families being threatened. When it's women, they always have their families, including young children, being threatened, and many of them have had to move places because to protect themselves. So it's not only virtual; it also happens in real life.
Yeah, online violence is violence. Before we move on to our next segment, please, Angela, do jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, I've been doxxed myself. And when it happened to me, they put all my family's information, including my son, who was only 7 at the time, 6 or 7 at the time. If he searches his name now, that is what he's seeing. These white supremacists talking about him online, coming up with these crazy stories about myself and my family. And it's difficult because obviously we don't just live offline anymore. We live online. So this is kind of integrated into who we are and how people perceive us, our ability to go out there in the world and work and, to function. Yeah. And that is terrifying. I don't see, when at Trump's inauguration, you saw all those tech bros line up right at the front and center, giving him huge amounts of cash. Where do we think this is headed? If we have public AI, that's government run, that's state sponsored. Why do we think that would be any better than what these tech companies are doing when they're all in each other's pockets all the time? There is really no way out of this. So, as much as we want to have a voice online, what I have done, I would just say this, and I know it's different because I have the privilege of, being in academia and having the platform that I have. But since I left social media, I joined boards. I sit on boards and I get, if we want to make an impact, join real life local groups, organizations, do things that can have an impact in the real world. Because sometimes I feel that we imagine that being online is making a difference in ways that sometimes I think it really isn't, that we're just shouting into a void sometimes. There are real people out there that need love and support, and our time can also go into that.
Yeah, I love that reminder to sort of be present and connected in physical space, right? Because in actually some ways we've become much more accustomed to being connected with each other online.
Yeah.
I always try, and imagine, and actually perhaps this also connects very deeply with the work that we're doing at Fuller, which is to also not just sort of name the problem, but also explore solutions. And what I would say to that is that, yes, we don't want sort of like Silicon Valley owned, this black box algorithms that we cannot control, that we cannot name, that if we challenge or governments challenge, that we are told, that you are standing in the way of innovation. What we want instead is, what is called feminist tech, or, there are other types of people who are building platforms too, right? Because as a Cameroonian girl who was going to university in the UK, I was grateful for platforms like Facebook that connected me to my loved ones all over the world. When one of my best friends died at university, I had never met her family, who were Zimbabwean but lived in Botswana, and I used Facebook to find her brother to tell him the news. And so, and then much more seriously, Kenyans on Twitter, KOT, are a phenomenal force that are really useful for sort of organizing and so um I think about that sense of what you've said about the power that we have in our hand, and I guess the alternative is not to throw technology away, but to actually actively support other types of technology organized around other types of principles. And I'm really excited. We've just hired a tech correspondent, and so to be looking at those alternatives, right? To call out the systems that aren't working, but to also say to people, well, where can you go instead? Because Angela, not everyone is as illustrious as you. They don't want us all on boards, girl. Like
I'm
we
sorry,
don't all have a board in our
I
future.
shouldn't really be speaking about this, but you're right. I mean, we love technology, we need technology, and I want to be as optimistic as you about the possibility for, a different kind of experience online, a kind of more nourishing and validating experience online. I hope we get there. I really do.
Well, we have to support it and build it. And so we have a half hour left. There are some questions that came in advance. There's some questions that have come in now. If you are like itching to say something, please do send a question in. And you can't see them. There are two of my colleagues at the Fuller Project. One is sat on the floor, bless her heart, who are passing me notes with your questions. So please, people who are following this conversation online, I also love the use of emojis. That's just about all I can see of the screen from here. So do send in your questions. As we go to, heart. I hope that's not my mom, because otherwise, anyway, I will save the story for another day. Of the first person to comment on my first article on The Guardian was my mom. So as questions are coming in, we are going to the quick fire round. So in this round, I want to learn from our Fuller friends about a few different things that have struck them this year. Angela, I'm saving the hope question for last, so you can, you have time to sort of crank up the optimism. Okay, let's start with what book, film, song, or album touched you this year? Which is or maybe there's one of each. Is there a book either of you would like to shout out?
I was more thinking about music, but
Go on, go for it. If you haven't read a word this year, that's okay too.
there is that French Comorian singer Imani who just released an album which name is Women Deserve Rage. And I love the idea of
Women
using
deserve
rage as a
rage.
political tool. Because it's articulated something that 25 made impossible to ignore. Anger is not a pathology, it's an evidence to me. And the idea that the album refuses to demand that women, especially racialized and marginalized women, remain polite while facing violence, while facing oppression or political regression is very, very, to me, politically constructive. And it's like in this moment where when the reproductive rights are rolled back and we're facing so many conflicts all across the world, the excess is is the violence of what we're facing, not the rage that we can feel. And I remember that Bell Hooks used to say that the rage of the oppressed is never the same as the rage of the privileged. And I think that that album, which is very, very good actually, that you should listen to, Women Deserve Rage, captures that idea very, very strongly.
I love that. Everybody do know that we are going to be sending round an email after the event, not immediately after, because women deserve rest too. But we will be sending one with resources and the links to articles, but also the albums and other things that our speakers mentioned here. So you don't have to worry about that. Angela, do you have a book, a film, a song? What was it?
I mean, when you talk about books, you're in my wheelhouse. I read so much nonfiction. It's just unbelievable. I know it doesn't seem that way from here, but that's because I'm still moving all my books from home into my office. And there's been so much good literature by women out this year. Arundhati Roy's book, which is outstanding, of course, and my friend Sarai Chamley has just got a new book out. Yes. There's a lot of good feminist literature out this year, but I want to just shout out a book by a man, Peter Beinart, Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza, which is for someone who I don't know the Middle East very well. I know it only from the news that I read. To have that kind of such moral clarity that he brings to this question is just outstanding. It's such a beautiful book, and it really kind of just automatically clarifies everything for you in your mind, and he brings a lot of expertise to that region.
I love that. That is a really good recommendation. I will venture one, and given that we've had a song and we've had a work of nonfiction, maybe I will share I was going to say the one book I did read from end this year, but I don't want people falling off the chat disgusted with me. So one of the things I read this year, but the only novel I think I read this year was Miranda July's All Fours. And it is a fantastic novel about a woman who is going through perimenopause, which was another really big theme this year. I don't know if it was just on my corner of the internet. There has been so much more talk about menopause and the effects of menopause and the lack of adequate research and support for people who have menopause. But this book is just quite an eccentric romp, into what kind of happens in that relationship and in that life of this woman who, is the embodiment at some point of sort of like the expression zero shits given, as I hear is often comes with that phase of life. So have either of you read that, Miranda July's All Four?
No, I haven't.
No. Well, if you read novels, that is definitely a good one. A long train ride from Vienna back to my home in Amsterdam kept me company. So every year around this time of year, various dictionaries come out with their word of the year. What was your word of the year?
If I was to ask my son, it would be 6-7, which I still don't understand. I just still don't get. But for me, it would be other, because all I've been. That's going to be the title of my next book. It's all I can think about is that when we get shoved in these little boxes that tell us this is who you are and this is who you have to be, that every instinct in my body says, no, I'm just other. That's all we are, really. That's all they're really trying to do. And can we claim that? Can we just claim that for ourselves and just be okay with it? I'm fine.
I love that. I mean, that's sort of like the francophone writer Amin Mahlouf, right, whose book is Les Identités Meurtrieuses, like deadly identities or something like this, right? And he is writing about how we contain, another expression for it, we contain multitudes. We have multiple identities, and the only ones that we tend to defend are the ones that are under threat. And so what happens when we embrace this idea that we are other? And if everyone was, how would that? Yeah, we are the other. What is your word of the year, Rokhaya?
It's funny because I published a dictionary on feminism in March, so it's
Yes,
a lot of words.
Pick just one.
I think I'll pick because of what has happened recently in France. I will pick the word consent because the word finally shifted from a private ethic to a public legal and political threshold. It's just been included in the law to define rape in France. And to me, that's very important because it wasn't a requirement to have explicit consent. And to me, it makes a lot of sense, especially given what we've spoken about, the non-consensual AI-generated sexual content or assault or, all the fake news or gender disinformation. And of course, the conflict, the idea of consenting to what you're facing is very important to me.
I love that. Yeah, mine is one that has already come up in this conversation. It was masculinities or manosphere. It felt very much this year that both those words, in all manner of conversation, right, was one that was very much the word of the year. Okay, I have others on my list, but let me include questions from our guests attending the event and listening in. Where do either of you turn to challenge yourselves?
I listen to right-wing podcasts to understand the other point of view, which I know sounds terrible, but I just want to know what's going on in the minds of these people who are now running the world. I want to understand them. And very often it's religion. They just feel this kind of very strong religious conviction that liberals are sending the world to hell in a handcart and they are somehow saving the world. And it does help me to know that that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, very helpful. Rokhaya, where do you go to challenge yourself?
I go to work. I take part to several TV news show in which I debate with far right journalists. So it's my weekly challenge to debate, to be the only or one of the few women on the panel and systematically the only person of color and the most left-wing person, and to debate with them or to interview them when they're invited to the show. So it's my part of the work.
You are doing God's work. Yeah, love that. And I love this question. I feel like there are poets in the audience. Who expands you?
I mean, I would say my students, because they belong to a different generation from me, and they help me see things from a completely different perspective. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for them.
I love that answer. Rokhaya? Your
I'd
far-right
say-
interviewees expanding you?
I'd say my friends, because I think that friendship is not as much valued as romantic love, and it's a kind of love that's not really celebrated as it should.
Right.
And it's kind of relationship that can last for a lifetime. And they are the people that you have chosen, that know you the best, and that grounds you when you're lost. So they're the people who expand me when I'm trying to get myself somewhere.
I love that too. Now there's a question here. The speakers want to know, actually, some people are, so there, I felt like the question was in two parts, so I'm just trying to sort of think about how I phrase this. What is the work that you see or that is done to fight the anti-rights movements, right? So I think you had both sort of spoken to that at the start of the conversation, and there was a question. I think people are trying to look for where to find signs of reprieve, hope, inspiration, but also to better understand your work too. So feel free to sort of take a little bit longer to answer that question, talking about the work that you see, but also how you situate yourself within it. Rokhaya, should we start again with you?
Yes, I think that education is an important work. To me, it would be going to places where what I stand for is not usually heard, and trying to make my case and to expose people who are not there to hear what I have to say, to expose them to that kind of rhetoric and to those that kind of discourse. And of course, Yeah, so it would be debating, having a podcast, writing, and trying also to tell about what's going on in my country from the outside. So writing for also international outlets, that helps a lot because um, it's much more difficult to challenge your country from the inside. So using whatever is available to you on the outside and including, having the opportunity to speak with you tonight is very important actually in my work. So that supports me and that also gives me some legitimacy when I'm back home and when I can say that, so there are some people who are interested to listen to what not only me but all the people who are in the same set of idea as me have to say, and that's to me that's really central and that helps me a lot. And actually we're speaking about how social media have been have some political sides. To me, it was a game changer to be able to stay on social media even when I was challenged by the mainstream media, because at some point they cannot ignore you totally when you have some following, when you have support from social media.
No, that's really important. And if you need, there are a good several dozen, a good 50 or so people on this call who will happily co-sign how relevant and important and valuable your work is, Rokhaya. So, our small little part, you can mobilize this army for yourself.
Thank
What
you so
about you,
much.
Angela?
I mean, what I see on the ground is that often this is happening in courtrooms, that, when these executive orders or these big bills are that the government is trying to pass, there is a pushback that's happening on the ground by lawyers, civil rights organizations saying, no, you can't do this. And it's quite effective. So things are being blocked on multiple fronts in these courts, just because there are individuals who are willing to kind of make that kind of effort. And that's often how social change works. I've noticed is that if you look historically, the way that women gain rights is often through individual court challenges, individual cases that somehow change everything. In the early 19th century, if in England, if a woman left her husband, the children belonged to him. She didn't have any rights over her own kids. It was because a woman bought a court case and fought for the rights to have access to her children, that then the law was changed and now women and men have equal rights to their children. In fact, for a while, women had more rights to their children in the eyes of the courts. That legal equality, which we think of as done and dusted, that this is finished. Actually, it's always happening because the challenges come in one way. You have to push back in the other direction. The Roe v. Wade question still has to be addressed in the US. Marital rape in India, it still shocks me that marital rape is still legal in India. So there's lots of legal work, I think, that can be done around the world, and that's where I see people making the most difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very sexy, but strategic
It's not.
litigation
Yeah,
is so
it's
important.
critical. It's a
Yeah.
difference between you having freedom and not having freedom.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think relating to this, the Fuller Project, we're moving the way in which we produce our journalism in 2026 to an editions model, bundling our reporting around a specific topic so that we can build a package of work that allows you to go deeper into that subject. And the one that we will start with in January, the sort of our loose well, not loose, but our theme is revolutions. And there is a question that has come in from an attendee to the event, which is which protest movements led by women stayed with you from 2025? Um, Women in movements.
Hmm.
Um, Oh my God, there are so many. I think women are fighting on so many different fronts. I don't know if there's a single one. But I do think, I mean, since Rokhaya brought it up, everything that happened around the Pico case, I think was very critical. It did kind of reset things, and there was this great, big mobilization around that, that also, in a similar way to Me Too, made people have to reconsider their relationships, think more carefully about what it means to be free within marriage. I think marriage is that next frontier of feminism that we're really going to have to confront. What does it really mean? You know, not just legally, but what does the institution of marriage mean for for gender and the future of gender. So I imagine, yeah, that's the next big battle probably.
Oh, you're skipping ahead. You're looking ahead.
I'm sorry.
Rokhaya, any movements that, yeah, were led by women or where women played an important part this year that you are thinking about?
I'd say it's mostly informal movements. Women have been present in many different spaces, especially there was a movement, like I wouldn't say that women were at the forefront, but they were very present to block everything in France in September. When the president decided to again appoint a right-wing prime minister, even if the legislative election put the left, in the first position. So like how women are present in all the grassroots movements, how they're able to strike, to block everything, and also in the Pedico case, how they gathered without consulting themselves, just every day for months, going there, saluting Gisèle Pellico when she entered or exited the court, being there, and actually it revivified the feminist movement in Avignon, which was in the place where the court was. So it's to me it really renewed and reinforced also the feminist movement in France, because it just illustrated what we've been saying for decades about the fact that it we don't need a man to be a stranger to fear them. Like they can be dangerous. The most dangerous men to a woman are the men that they know, and it just made our case. So yeah, I think that the Pedico case was a very inspiring moment of feminine solidarity and feminist solidarity, actually.
I would love to read that story, or what, the idea of how the Avignon, this feminist movement in a city was revived as women started to show up day in, day out to support. And I love the sound of that as a story. Okay, we are into the last segment. We have 7 minutes left. It's a good thing it's a short one. So I have named the segment "In Out" because New Year's resolutions are, I think they're very much dead. I think we're all no one who's cool anymore sets New Year's resolutions. So I will not be asking you to do that. Instead, the concept of in and out. So what is going to be in for you in 2026, whether that is a practice or an action or a task, whatever it could be, and what is going to be out. Angela, can we have your ins or your in and out?
Well, my in would be read more fiction because I read way too much nonfiction and want to get back to it. It's very difficult just for work reasons. But yeah, there is such good literature out now. I know we all think that people have stopped reading, that they don't care about reading. People do care about reading, and bookshops will tell you that. So I want to dive into that more. Out, oh, I am trying to fly less for climate reasons. So I'm trying very, very hard to limit the amount of travel. I've done pretty well the last couple of years. I travel by train a lot more now, wherever I can. The US makes it very difficult, I have to say. And this is something that Europeans who move to the US always complain about, is that why can't we have trains like they have in Europe? You can get everywhere by train. But yeah, I take trains wherever I can.
Okay, so flying is out and fiction is
Fiction
in.
is in.
Nice. Alliterative. Rokhaya.
I think maybe uh, um, maybe like having a soft life, and maybe for women not doing like unpaid emotional labor for like just trying to value what they do on a daily basis, and how their work actually structures the society, and how the society doesn't collapse because we're working for free in very different places. So maybe like trying not to to focus on ourselves and not to work for the benefit of others without being paid. So to me, that's the in that needs to be.
Your in is a chapter. It's like I initially thought you were saying the soft life was out, and I thought, oh no,
No, it's
are we
definitely
back to
in. It's in.
productivity? Soft life is in. Okay, and what is out?
Um, I guess like the not all men line, it's
Oh, say
out.
more,
Like we're
please.
tired
Not
of
all
that. Like
men.
not anymore. We don't care if you are a good man, if you wash dishes, and like it's not our problem. We don't care.
Go tell your bros that you're a guy who washes dishes. Don't come tell us.
Just wash your dishes and stay
Just
quiet.
yeah,
There's
wash your
nothing to
dishes
brag
and stay
about. We do
quiet.
that all the time.
You found the sponge in your house. Well done, buddy. Well done. Oh, well, that's fantastic. I would say that the to the question about movements, I am sure, like with anything that we see as a sort of flash in the pan, there was a lot of organizing and work happening under the covers or under the shadows. And as we are researching revolutions, one of the things that we are thinking about is how the protest movements of the last decades, whether or not they achieved their aims or not, particularly as women were so active in so many of them, and yet let's just take Tunisia for example, and their demands didn't end up getting bedded in, and looking at places like Bangladesh and what might be happening there, etc. So we're thinking of those things, but really just in awe of the women in South Africa who, to coincide with the G20 meeting there, organized essentially a sort of strike action day and prompted the government to recognize the crisis of femicide. And now, of course, we'll have to see what ensues because of the exceedingly high rates of gender-based violence and murder of women because they're women. But that mobilizing and action was just so fantastic. So I just wanted to shout out, those South African women organizers, because I am a new editor-in-chief of the Fuller Project. My in and out have to be work-related. Obviously, I might still be on probation, so so I have to make them work-related. I would say in is building community around our journalism, and not just sort of broadcasting or sort of being single monodirectional. We want to be in community with people who care about the work. And out, what is out? Out is thinking that just because it is important, it is enough. People will care. Like, we have to make that case for why journalism that focuses on women, accountability journalism, why being a watchdog for women is a cause that people should support. Our newsroom is a newsroom that people should get behind. So I'm seeing hearts, so I'm going to assume that there's some people who like the sound of that, which means as we come to close our conversation, I do want to say that we are in the middle of our end of year campaign, and looking to for more people to support the work of the Fuller Project by directly contributing to the work of the Fuller Project, but also directly contribute to the Fuller Project by being in community with us. We want to hear your ideas about what we should be covering in our editions. We want to focus and share your expertise. If you are working in a specific area of work or want us to feature someone, get in touch with us, be in conversation and in community with us. And it only remains for me to do two things: to share the web address for where you can support our work, because I will have failed if I don't do that. So fullerproject.org/support. Please go and give us your coin, because capitalism. But beyond that, to two fantastic women who have been in community with me over the last hour and a half, have shared their brilliance and their wisdom. I hope to everyone who was listening in, you have enjoyed it as much as I have. Angela Saini and Rokhaya Diallo, I cannot thank you enough for looking back on 2025 with the Fuller Project. I hope we can call on you again for us to
Pleasure.
make it make sense in lots of other contexts. We'll take it on the road. Where can we look up for your work in 2026? What have you both got coming up that we should know about?
So I still write for The Guardian, so you can just go to my page on The Guardian, and it's more accessible for people who speak English. And for French speakers, I'm still working on the news channel BFM and France Info on a weekly basis and comment the news. But I'm working on a graphic novel that should be released, I hope, in May in French. So for now, there are no plans for it to be translated, but it's a biography of Angela Davis. So it's and I work on it with Annelise Nemorin, who is a perfect illustrator. So it's the last steps of it.
How exciting. I can't wait to find that. I'm a very big fan of graphic novels
Oh,
in French
nice,
or
nice,
other
good to
languages.
know.
Yeah. Angela, you've got your book in the works.
Yeah, I'm just finishing that now. I'm sorry, that's all I can think about at the moment because I'm in the final stages of editing, but it won't be out until January 2027, unfortunately. So nothing yet. But anyone who does want to read it and wants to get on a kind of early readers blogger list or anything like that, you just let me know and I will add you to my list so you can
Their hands
see it.
going up in the room. You can't see them, but they're fuller members of staff are volunteering themselves. I have
Please.
never met such a large Angela fan club as the people. It was almost like an unspoken question in the recruitment phase at Fuller, and then we added Rokhaya Diallo, and so like yeah, with my team, I can do no wrong at least for another 72 hours. So we're excited about that. We will share those resources too when they come out. Please do keep us in the loop, and we will tell folks about that when that comes. Thank you also to everybody who attended, and especially to those of you who paid. This is our first time doing an event like this, and also asking people to pay for it, and to see that people did, and they weren't all my family members. So thank you so very much. Have a wonderful rest of year. Look after yourselves, look after each other, and thank you again. Bye for
Thank you
now.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.